Mr. Speaker, I wanted nothing more than to come to this floor today and vote for a military commissions bill that comports with our American values, that the rest of the world would see as fair and humane, that honors our international commitments and protects our own troops who fall into enemy hands. And that, as the ranking member has pointed out, the Supreme Court would uphold. I regret that the chairman and the ranking member aren't shoulder to shoulder on this issue, as should be the case. Too often have we considered these weighty matters of defending our country, defeating terrorism, protecting Americans in a partisan fashion. I think that's regrettable. I think the American people think it's regrettable. Make no mistake, every single member of this House wants our president to have the intelligence necessary to prevent future terrorist acts on our nation and our allies. Every single one of us wants those responsible for 9/11 and other terrorist acts to be tried fairly and punished accordingly. And we want those convictions to be upheld by the courts. And we want to stop future attacks. But regrettably, the bill before us today, in my opinion, falls far short of the high standards that this Congress and the American people expect and demand, and indeed that the world expects of America. This legislation at bottom is really more about who we are as a people than it is about those who seek to harm us. That's true if it were domestic. It's true internationally. No one wants to defend murderers and rapists, those who would harm our people, whether they live here or they live abroad. However, defending America requires us to marshal the full range of our power: diplomatic and military, economic, and yes, moral. And when our moral standing is eroded, our international credibility is diminished as well. We must not lightly dismiss the somber warning of our former Secretary of State, the leader of our armed forces, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, serving on the administrations of President Bush I and serving as his Secretary of State. He said this, and I quote Colin Powell: "The world is beginning to doubt the moral basis of our fight against terrorism." I fear this legislation before us will further diminish that credibility. While this bill properly lists as punishable offenses certain grave breaches of Article 3 of the Geneva Convention, it leaves almost unfettered discretion to the administration to define anything less than such grave breaches. Why should we be concerned about providing this administration with such discretion, one might ask? Because our President and our Attorney General have routinely flouted congressional authority with signing statements and legal interpretations which give to them unfettered authority. As the Washington Post has stated, and again I quote, "The Bush administration's history is one of interpreting limitations on interrogation tactics, including Mr. McCain's previous legislation banning cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment as permitting methods most people regard as torture," close quote. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, this bill eliminates the fundamental legal right of habeas corpus. What is habeas corpus about? Why should we care that terrorists who attack our country? Do you have one additional minute?
I yield additional 1 minute to the gentleman.
Thank you. Because we might make a mistake. That's why we build in protections, to protect against mistakes, because we're human. The bill would greatly minimize judicial oversight by establishing a new appeals process and centralizing consideration of cases in the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, thus stripping other appellate courts from hearing cases currently pending before them. Mr. Speaker, I am absolutely committed to winning the war on terrorism and bringing to justice any and all terrorists who would threaten us, harm us, or cause harm to our country. However, I also believe we have an obligation to the Constitution and to our oath to do so in a manner that is consistent with our values, that makes us different than other nations in the world, that secures just convictions, and that enhances our international credibility, thereby strengthening our national security. I end as I started. I regret that I cannot support this legislation, and I regret that it is not being offered in a bipartisan fashion. It would have been better for us, for the people, and for our country.
Gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield. I want to take 30 seconds. I want to take 30 seconds.
The chair notes a disturbed gallery and reminds all persons in the gallery that they are here as guests of the House and that any manifestation of approval or disapproval of